You are listening to Draw 4 Podcast. Good tidings, and thanks for joining us. My name is Joshua Kelly. I am a member of the production team here for Draw 4.
I am James Kelly. I am also a member of the production team here for Draw 4.
I am Joseph Dunlap. I am the executive producer for Draw 4, so I am a de facto member of the production team, and I'm also a writer for Meta League.
And I'm Brenda Smith, and I stream on Twitch.
Brenda, it's nice to finally have you on Draw 4, since you've been part of the project since day one.
I'm glad to finally have made it.
I'm glad that your health issues have run their course, and you're doing better now, and you're preparing for... What tournament are you preparing for?
I'm playing in regionals at the end of this month.
Awesome. At the end of this month, I'm actually planning on going to a Grand Prix in Texas, so hopefully we can compare notes on that.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Since I normally play limited, I don't know what I'm doing, and I have 3 weeks to figure it out.
If you ever need a test, I'm available. Josh, what are we talking about today?
Just talking about pre-release of both of the Gatewatch, just our general impressions of it, and our thoughts on the block as a whole, and then going into the lightning round and community question afterwards. In my case, for pre-release, a hit or miss type of deal for me, because James and I were talking about it the night before, and I told him that if I had gotten anything in any relation to Izzet, I'd said I would immediately run Izzet Kellers just to see how it would work. I ultimately did get 2 Storm Chaser Mages in one pack, one regular and one foil. So I did that, but then I also saw that where there was some other Kellers that were going around. So unfortunately for me, I spent the whole night trying to piece together a puzzle, starting with Teamer Kellers first round, then Grixis Kellers, and then finally in the last round I went Izzet. Ultimately on the night I wound up just breaking even, going 2 and 2.
I would have to say for the pre-release, because we went to the midnight release of it, it was from, obviously, midnight till 5 in the morning, and it was tiring, but really fun. My end result for Oath of the Gatewatch was alright, nothing more, nothing less than that. In my case, I went with Boros, Kellers, white and red. It treated me well. It could have been better if I just went white and black instead, because I had a bunch of allies and stuff I could have went with, but I was like, let's see how the red and white treats me, but oh well.
I had a really fun pre-release, actually. I just now, in the past few weeks, got to get back into Magic. The months and months of writing for Meta League, building up the funds with which to buy a deck, meant that I got my first F&M in about 6 months. So I got to play my red-green ramp deck with Eldrazi, and had a lot of fun at the F&M. I don't know whether this is an indication of things to come, but limited in this block, it's a lot of fun. As a lot of us kept saying, when Oath of the Gatewatch came out, we saw the big picture, and we realized this is actually a lot of fun. So I got a lot of good Eldrazi. I got a few decent allies, but I looked at my strength, and my strength was actually black and red Eldrazi. Mostly black Eldrazi, and 3 really good removal cards. I saw some strength in blue, so I, at the last second, thought, you know what, I'm going to splash some blue. I had 3 counter spells, including a main deck negate, and I had the Surge to draw 2 at instant speed. That card. Put it on the screen now. Poof. So I went ahead and did Grixis Eldrazi for the first 3 rounds, and I went 1-2 with that. I went back and tweaked it and realized I was forcing red. So I took out the red and put in more blue, and at that point, I had a Gravity Negator combo with Warden of Geometries. Warden of Geometries has Vigilance, but also taps for a colorless mana, so when you attack with Gravity Negator, you get the trigger to pay a colorless mana to give something else flying, then you tap Warden of Geometries with the, he's got Vigilance, he can tap for mana now, and now you've got 2/3 flyers coming at your opponent's face. And then for the next 2 rounds, I went undefeated.
I also played in a bunch of weekend events. I did pretty well. I was 6-1, just playing black-green good stuff. The pre-release as a whole went well. I also did really well with a red-white deck in our midnight event, not losing a single game in that one.
So what's next on the agenda?
Well, if anyone has any other stories they'd like to tell them now. If not, I just want to get your impressions of what you think of the block as a whole.
I have something to share that didn't make it into an article because there just wasn't enough material. One of the guys who runs Puka Trade published something just this past week saying that when there was the big panic and the big rush to sell Splinter Twins and, screw everyone possible over so that you don't get screwed over, which does not have any place in the Magic community. I wanted to say what he talked about here because it's not enough to constitute an article of its own because, it's said in an article, but I feel like it's worthy of our discussion. First, let me say how Puka Trade is organized. You say on Puka Trade what card you're looking for. Should you have enough points in your account, because it's an online currency, to purchase the card, then at any point, as long as it's on your want list, someone can initiate a trade with you and send you the card and then receive the points from you. So there were people who were asleep and didn't know about the bannings till the next morning and were not able to take the card Splinter Twin off of their want list, who received Splinter Twins in the mail the following day. And that kind of attitude has no place in the Magic community, to try and get ahead by screwing somebody else over. In-game, sure, but out of game, that is not what this community stands for.
During that whole time, it was just like a giant, I don't know what to say. It was like a Great Depression, basically. Everyone trying to buy in, get out, just panic ensued for like a couple of hours before everything settled down, and everyone was like, okay, let's try and figure this out in a nice, orderly fashion.
Chris Cooper, who's part of this podcast, the last time we recorded, made the point that you get your value from your cards by playing them. That's why it doesn't matter if a card is worn, as long as you're playing it, it still taps for the same amount of mana and so forth. It's interesting to me that we work so hard to get all these cards for our decks, yet we still pretend we care about the value of the card after we have it. When we're going to FNM after FNM, going to Grand Prix after Grand Prix, the value of the cards no longer matters. The value of the cards actually increases with each time we pay a tournament fee, if you want to think about it that way. Each time you get use out of it, you've increased your value that you have in that card, your stock in that card. And then we pretend, only when we no longer want the card, that we care about the value of the card again. And then, at that point, if we find out the card's no longer worth the same amount of money, we get upset. And it's so weird. This is not a stock market. This is a trading card game. We buy the card so we can get our use out of it. It's like going to Vegas. You spend the money to go there. The money you bring with you to gamble with is considered a loss. Whatever you come home with is considered a gain, even if it's less than what you brought. It's the same thing with cards. The money you spend on the cards is money lost. From then on, you're getting your value out of it by playing. So when Splinter Twin got banned, everyone all of a sudden cared what the value of that card was, simply because they couldn't play it anymore. I'm off my soapbox on that subject.
Alright, good to hear. Brenda, James, you have anything to say?
I just think that's a good way to think about it. I mean, so many people treat their binders as an investment portfolio and get wrapped up in the money and forget we're here to play a game and be a part of a community that, improves our lives, and screwing somebody over is not the way to be a part of that community.
I would have to agree with Joe about the whole value statement of your cards. It's more so, personally, I believe it's more so in the memories that you make with those cards. Like, when I first got into Magic, my very first rare, actually mythic rare I should say, I pulled was Geist of St. Traft. And I always say this to my friends every single time. Even though he's sitting in my trade binder, Geist is my homie. I fist bump him every single time, even if I don't use him. He's so cool. I love that card so much just because I have memories with him. And even though I'm probably going to be trading him in for the shiny ones that are in the dual decks, I'll still have those memories with those cards just because Geist is my homie. He was my first mythic I pulled, and it's just a memorable thing for me. So that's how I feel about it.
I can vouch on the fist bumping, by the way. I have seen him do it.
No shame.
It's all good and well for us to talk about how memories creates value, which I've just said, and James, you just said. But it's more than that. It's not like saying, well, it doesn't matter that Splinter Twin's not worth anymore, because you have good memories, right? Cheesy smile, and then hope that they suddenly forget that the card they had for so long is worthless. The cards they have, other than Splinter Twin, are still worth money. Kiki Jiki is spiking in price. I don't know if anyone's noticed, but it has spiked in price a lot. So it's not like you can't play the deck. It's one card, and if it ever gets unbanned, it'll still be a valuable card.
Going from one thing of monetary value to another. Joe, is there anything you would like to say about the lightning round?
Well, I mean, I did type up a whole bit of copy here about the lightning round because I asked you whether I could sort of take over with this topic, which is the increasing price of budget Magic. And this is a topic that has been suggested to me in the past by Steve Weiss. He's the head judge of my LGS. It was originally a suggestion for an article for Mana Leak about the influence of internet personalities on the price of pauper decks. And the example given was that at the time, the professor of Tolarian Community College showcased a monogreen Tron pauper deck for Modern that tripled in price following the video being posted. So first off, that wasn't intentional by any means, but it is a great example of supply and demand at work. Let's jump forward then. This past week, Saffron Olive of MTG Goldfish showcased a pauper deck based around Eldrazi Displacer. It's really sweet. It's a combo deck that creates an infinite loop by blinking Brood Monitor and sacrificing the 3 Eldrazi Scions it brings with them to then activate Eldrazi Displacer and blink Brood Monitor again, which triggers Zulaport, Cutthroat, or Altar of the Brood, either through things entering the battlefield or through things dying. So the article was posted this past week, and the deck, even as he was posting it, was rising in price. It's a supply and demand thing, again, causing the rise in price, but I wanted to bring this up and see what you guys thought about this, because the question here is, do internet personalities in the Magic community have a noticeable impact on the price of cards? Does a deck cease to be called Pauper if it triples in price? If the lure of a Pauper deck is its affordability with the foreknowledge that it isn't necessarily top tier, what's the point in playing a Pauper deck after it's risen above Pauper level prices? At that point, you're just playing a deck. What do you guys think about that?
I would have to say, considering I play Red-Green Tron in Modern, and that's like leaps and bounds in pricings, the Modern Green Tron Pauper deck was listed on the video at $60 in paper form, so to say it's tripled is about $340 to $370, give or take. That's mostly due to the fact of the matter that in Tron, all those pieces pretty much trickle down into Mono Green Tron Pauper, but then also because of those videos, people probably are playtesting the decks or are interested in the decks just to try and see how they would feel about running it. So it's pretty much just interest would be the first thing about it, is people play testing decks just because, oh hey, here's a deck, I want to try and see if it works any better or worse than anything else I've played, so it's just like, why not go and run it? But then to note of it, that video was posted October 13th, 2015. That was 3 months ago, and the banning of Twin and Summer Balloon pretty much caused those prices in Red-Green Tron and Modern to forcibly affect the Mono Green Pauper deck to rise in price as well. So necessarily that's more so just how the meta and pricings have been working, just because of how the economy of the cards have been going. I wouldn't necessarily say that's a problem for the professor, because he was just doing it as a deck tech. Necessarily it's just how the economy has been working, and it's just been causing an ever-evolving roller coaster of the economy of cards to go, whether it's because of bans or playability or value, whatever. It's just necessarily it's not towards the personalities, it's just how the economy's been working. I'm done ranting now.
I was going to say, going off of the same points as you, James, I basically agree with you. I wouldn't really say that it's any internet personality's fault, whether it's Tellurian Community College, the Mana Source, or any of them. They just want us to be able to see different decks that may seem interesting or appeal to us in varying ways. And I can actually vouch on this one, because during last year, when the Modern season came about, right after the pod bannings, Abzan had become a thing. I remember this vividly, because I watched the video like 5 times. The Mana Source had done an Abzan Modern deck. It had like Marsh Flats, it had Siege Rhinos, it had all the money cards in it that were going around, like Noble Hierarchs and so forth. Looking at the prices from then, which were ungodly amounts of money, it was that deck in total was well over like $800 something if you were to get every piece for it, the fetches, the lot, and also considering Siege Rhino was really high at the time. Now Siege Rhino's like $3-4, while everything else has either risen in value or stayed the same at value, like Marsh Flats being still at around $50 or so. Noble Hierarch dropping down in value because of the Modern Masters reprintings. But just getting back to the subject, it seems it's not so much the personalities of the internet in the Magic community, it's just supply and demand, bannings, and other such stuff has been the influences. Not so much personalities, it's more so the outside influences as well as them, because we all look to them to see what's new, what's interesting, along with websites, articles, blogs, stuff like that. But it's more so the outside influences than anything else.
See, I have to kind of disagree, and I think it is the internet personalities. It's not their fault, and this isn't distracting from them or their content creation, but because they're personalities, they draw attention to decks, and that causes the supply and demand problem. I also think it's a cycle. So, we have these decks we're talking about now. 6 months from now, we'll be talking about different decks that have risen in price. So I think in some ways they actually help, and the increase in price of Pauper, it go spike up, but shortly after it'll fall back down when somebody else posts another deck that is the newest thing. And it's just an ebb and flow. What's the newest thing? And then there'll be decks that rise because they are the best deck, or they become better in the meta, or your local stores. But the internet personalities, the content creators, give us something to try, something to test, and something to grow from.
Because we're talking about personalities influencing the price of cards. Let's talk about Seance. And you made the correct point that it's not necessarily the fault of an internet personality that a card spikes in price or that a deck spikes in price. It's more the fact that people liked the deck. They were like, this is tasty. And then they go and buy it, and then it spikes the price through supply and demand. So the question really is whether a personality, a single person, can influence the price of a deck or a card. So there was the Seance experiment. Their experiment was that they could affect the price of one card just through actions that they set in motion. So they paid people to destroy Seance cards. They paid a few guys to even wear Seance t-shirts to events, and they tried to get someone to play Seance at the Pro Tour, but then they backed down from that because of legal issues. They were afraid of legal issues associated with sponsoring a player for a specific purpose in the Pro Tour. So if you look at the price of Seance, it was worth 24 cents a year ago. And then in March, it spiked to 47 cents or so. That's the fair trade price on MTG Price. And then this past month in January, it spiked to 70 cents. So, I mean, you spike a 20-cent card and it goes to 70 cents and nobody wants to buy it from you. What's the point, right? So they did influence the price a bit. Maybe from the hype. Who knows? I don't know why it spiked suddenly in January of all things. I just don't know. If you can't influence the price of a card just through your own actions, getting people to destroy the card, affecting supply and demand that way by affecting the supply and not the demand, then the only way to influence the price of a card is by influencing demand itself. So that is a better experiment than to see whether you could put together a budget deck, get someone like the Professor or Saffron Olive or the Mana Source to promote your Pauper deck, and then watch the price rise if you're able to get them to show it off, and if it's a decent deck. Those two things have to be factors involved. It has to be a good deck, at least decent, and then see if the price goes up. That ultimately is what would influence the price of maybe your pet card. If you made a good Seance deck that someone else liked, so far nobody likes a Seance deck that anyone has built. They always like the one that they built. That's my rant number 3. I'm sorry. I'll hand it back to you.
It's okay, Joe. Today is a day of soapboxing, apparently.
There's a lot of good topics. I mean, we talked about Splinter Twin runs and people screwing each other over with that. We talked about just the fact that Oath of the Gatewatch is better than people gave the block credit for, and it's got this influence in Modern, and maybe that's why they banned Splinter Twin. And then we talked about just the price of cards in general. That's a very passionate topic for the entire Magic community, so it's well worth talking about.
Right. It's a very passionate game. Just one of those things that we have a general hobby over, and that's actually why we love doing what we do and why we have this podcast.
Well, I say before we ask the community question, let's give Brenda the final word, since this is her first time to be on Draw 4.
Well, in relation to Pauper, it's something I haven't played a lot, but I do watch content creations, so I'm actually kind of excited to start playing it after this month and try to dig into my local game store, and I look forward to trying to buy some expensive Pauper decks as they rise in popularity.
Guess it's time for that community question, Josh.
The community question this time is, are card prices influenced by Magic the Gathering internet personalities? Yeah, I'd say that's a fair guesstimation on that. If it's good, it'll go far and rise up in price. If not, it just won't go anywhere, because actually most of the videos that I've seen from the Professor, like Soul Sisters, Burn, Merfolk, about the only 2 that he's done that I have not seen go anywhere have been 8-Rack. I think the other one was the mono green toxic one that he had done with poison.
I think you're meaning the infect counters.
Yeah, the infect one. That's what it was. Infect. Thank you.
You're welcome. I would have to say yes to the internet personalities raising the prices of cards as well.
I say yes if the deck is good.
Yeah, card prices I think are definitely influenced by internet personalities. It helps if the deck is good. It helps if the deck is fun, but I think there'll always be a little bit of a spike when any content is created around some new cards, new decks.
There was a community question. Anyone feel free to comment either on the manaleak.com on that post or just on YouTube in the comment section below. And it is time to end this episode. My name is Joshua Kelly. I am a member of the production team.
I'm James Kelly. I'm also a member of the production team here for Draw 4.
And I'm Joseph Dunlap, executive producer of Draw 4 Podcast.
I'm Brenda, and I stream on Twitch, and thanks for joining us.
This has been Draw 4 Podcast. Until next time, we wish you good fortune, and may you draw well.